This is KUR, I assume is how you would pronounce it, one of the recently released old-school inspired shooters that has currently just been put into early access. Currently, as far as the early access campaign goes, since it's like brand new, just got released pretty much, most of the early stuff, the earlier levels, are pretty much feature complete, with all of the aspects of the game being mostly finished there, so I'm mostly showing you the earlier levels in the cycle, with the later levels being a bit more empty as the game goes on, because those still need to be finished. But yeah, the early, like, 5 or 6 or so are completely finished, so that's what you got here. To be fair, even the ones after that still feel pretty good, but as it gets farther towards the end of the roughly 20 or so available levels, they do start to get a bit more sparse and a bit more unfinished feeling. So, like I said, it's mostly the earlier levels that are completely done right now, but the sort of mid-line, middle of the game levels are in a pretty good state as well. And in fact, if you were to look at what's currently available, I'd say the level design is actually the game's strongest point. As far as, old school inspired shooters go, there are certain things that you expect for them to have, and I think the level design of the currently finished levels definitely has what you would want from a game like this. They are quite large, they're very sprawling, they have a lot of different environments within each one, and they have a lot of secrets and little well-hidden areas and stuff for you to find, as well as lots of opportunities for platforming and things like that, because, well, we'll get on to that in a minute, but there are methods, sort of like rocket jumping, but a little bit different for you to get around the place in a fancy way. The levels themselves are pretty long, each one having quite a lot of optional stuff to do as well, with it uses the classic color-coded key system, so you can find, like red and yellow and purple keys for doors, key cards, and there will be often lots of doors in earlier parts of the level that you don't have to go back to actually exit the level, but that you can backtrack to once you find those keys and remember that they were there. And oftentimes some of the best kinds of older secrets from these sorts of games are secrets that let you get weapons that you wouldn't normally get for like a few more levels early, basically, and this does actually have some of those. So some of these doors and small kickable areas that you'll see will have a bit of early arsenal stuff, letting you get some ammo or particular weapons that you may not normally see, at least a little bit early. There are also some other advantages to finding these things, because you can find these upgrade terminals. You have a kick in this game, and it's a very, very useful kick because it can be used for a lot of different things, and it's such a central part of the game mechanics that the upgrade terminals are actually for upgrading the kick itself, adding things like doubling its charge kick damage to giving it the ability to suck in power-ups from a longer distance away, like magnetically and some other stuff like that. So you can only use each of these upgrade terminals once, and there's a small list of upgrades that you can get. None of them are necessary for completing the game. You can totally ignore these things or just not find them and still have a good time, but they are a nice extra reward for finding those secrets. So let's talk about this kick for a minute, because it is one of the central aspects of the game. It's something that's advertised as being one of the sort of big parts of its combat, and of course when you're going for an old school inspired shooter, since there are lots of them now, you gotta do something to set yourself apart a little bit, and the kick is definitely that for this game. Now I gotta say, kicks in games have there's a short but very venerable list of games that allow you to kick stuff, and it's always awesome. From drop kicking zombies in Dying Light, to the excellent bullet time kicks in Fear, or the blink kick in Dishonored 2. But, of course, the king of kicking things in games has to be Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, where the kick in that game is basically a license to have an illegal amount of fun with it. So, basically what I'm saying is more games should have the ability to kick things, because for some reason, due to some unknowable law of the universe, putting the ability to kick things in your game makes it like 300% more fun every time. And the kick in this game is definitely fun. It is worthy of being a central mechanic because it's very flexible. It works as just a simple get enemies away from you so you can shoot them kind of kick. It also does quite a bit of damage and has a charge to it that allows you to dash forward and kick through enemies, often sending them flying, sometimes just jibbing them straight away. Very good for destroying enemy shields and then shooting them in midair while they're recoiling. But it's not just a combat kick. It can actually be used for movement as well. I mentioned something kind of like a rocket jump. You can actually kick the ground after you jump to give yourself a big boost, akin to how a rocket jump works, except it doesn't hurt you. Kicks instead use this energy resource, but you'll pretty much never run out because enemies drop it all the time, and there are lots and lots of enemies, so you can very easily find more energy. But yeah, you can use a very well-timed kick off of the ground to give yourself a big boost and allow you to get up to areas you wouldn't have been able to before. You can also use it to kick yourself off of walls as a sort of like pseudo parkour move to give yourself some angular momentum. So if you have for instance, say a platform right above you, but you can't jump up to it because it's the same size as the platform you're on, you can't jump through it, you can jump forward towards the wall and kick off of it at sort of an angle to get yourself above to the higher platform. This allows for quite a lot of mobility in combat and in exploration, and is definitely a really fun aspect of the game. kicking enemies through the air is always fun. You can also use the charge kick to propel yourself more quickly, or even charge kick in midair to actually fly through the air with it. So there's really a lot of uses for this kick, and that's what makes it such a useful aspect of the game, and definitely something that's worth being one of the headlining features, because you can use it for so many things. You'll find yourself using it all the time. It's even bound to the right mouse button to be as easily reachable as possible, because you'll be pulling this thing out constantly, and it just makes the exploration and combat a lot more fun to be able to kick yourself around the place in a silly way and hop up onto all these hard to reach areas and kick off of walls and kick enemies through the air and stuff. It's just a lot of fun, and it definitely adds to the overall combat of the game to have this kick be a big part of it. Now, of course, the other really important thing in any old school shooter is its arsenal, and how are the weapons? Well, the weapons are actually pretty fun to use, I gotta say. Although the fact that the game calls its dual wield pistols akimbo pisties does actually make me want to die a little bit, but aside from that, the weapons are actually pretty good, and there's a good variety of silliness on display here. Most of the weapons are pretty ridiculous. They are very much like an old school style arsenal, as in they're not very, like, you know, realistic weaponry. They're all quite silly. So you have the aforementioned akimbo pistols that are actually quite satisfying because they fire in a very nice rhythm that makes it fun to strafe and kick around while shooting them. You'll also get a shotgun that can actually bounce its pellets around, a la the flat cannon from Unreal a little bit. You'll also get things like the Hellfire, which is a fiery assault rifle that actually causes explosions as it shoots. There is a big, almost lightning gun-esque laser kind of thing. There's also the Last Word, which is effectively a sniper laser that charges up and tends to insta-jib whatever it hits. There's also a freeze ray and a shrink ray, and even the bladed leg of a spider thing if you want a melee option to the game, and there's even more weapons than that. So yeah, the weapons, the overall arsenal is silly, it's over the top, and it actually is pretty effective. The sound assets of the weapons are pretty good, the animations are simple but effective. The game uses this kind of, well, it's a highly stylized art style that I find looks pretty good with the sort of crunchy pixeliness of it. I think the bright colors and things look nice in that style, and that extends very much to the weapons themselves. As far as enemy variety goes, you won't see a whole lot of it in the first 2 levels or so, but after that it starts to open up and you get much larger levels with a lot more different kinds of enemies in them, from the incredibly, deliberately, obviously annoying skull spider things to much more threatening enemies with various types of weapons, you know, plasma repeaters and lightning shotgun enemies, some with shields, some dual wielding. You'll get these big purple dudes that fire like bullet hell shotgun blasts of these huge purple projectiles towards you that you have to be careful of because they can cover like an entire arena's worth of space. You gotta really focus those guys down. There are also some larger and more threatening and kind of interesting robotic enemies with all sorts of different weapons attached to them. And the game also is a pretty big fan of throwing random boss fights your way, which I actually find to be pretty cool. You'll generally get a fairly large arena with a lot of stuff, you know, weapons and health packs and stuff scattered around it, and there will be some sort of boss fight there. Maybe it's the end of the level, or maybe it's sort of the middle of the level. You never really know. It just kind of throws them at you sometimes, but they always feel pretty fun to do. Each of the bosses has felt totally different so far. They've all had different strategies to beat them and different attacks to learn and all that stuff. The kind of stuff that you would want to expect from a boss fight in a game like this. And I just like the fact that it's totally okay with tossing them at you, just sort of like, here you go, and there they are. They don't necessarily have to be these huge end of episode bosses. There are a lot more of them than that, and sometimes you'll just sort of happen upon one while exploring the level or trying to get to the end. As far as the levels themselves, I mentioned that they're very open, but that doesn't mean they are hard to navigate. Even though they're quite large and sprawling and have lots of optional doors and things, the game also makes a point of marking the path that you're supposed to go with these flares, which I actually really appreciate. I like it in games that, you know, mark where you're meant to go in some subtle or non-subtle way. You know, Valve is known to do an incredibly good job at this with lighting in games like Half-Life and Left 4 Dead, so I appreciate any game that takes a similar idea to that, and actually it helps you know where you need to go so that you know where you can go first if you want to explore, you know what I mean? Because if you want to explore and find out the secrets in a game like this, you want to go the direction that you're supposed to go last, and you want to go every other direction first. So the fact that the game very clearly marks its intended path through the levels with these flares periodically placed around helps you understand where you need to go, where you need to return to, and where the more optional paths are, which is appreciated to someone who likes to explore every nook and cranny possible before I get like locked into a boss fight or something. The game also has voice acting, by the way, which I wasn't expecting, and it's honestly quite good. Especially the main character's voice acting has a lot of character to it, a lot of personality. She's got a really nice voice, I think, and a lot of the other characters have very silly kind of caricature style voices as well. The story isn't meant to be taken seriously, obviously, but the overall voice acting itself is actually pretty good in my opinion, and I think it does actually add to the character of the game to have these sort of over-the-top voiced segments. I think it helps, and also the fact that they don't interrupt the gameplay. You can keep playing while they're talking, and when you find little audio logs and things, you can just keep playing. So if you don't really care about that sort of thing, it doesn't make you listen to it. It's just something that's there, and you can listen to it if you want to, which is a very good way to do that sort of thing in an old school inspired shooter, because they were not known for interrupting you with cutscenes and things. So the fact that this game doesn't do that is nice. So overall, I would say KUR is actually a pretty fun time. I think it has a lot of promise because what's shown in the early half dozen or so levels is a really good grasp on fun and rewarding old school level design, and I think that if the future levels take that into account and are designed in the same way, then you will have a really nice 20 or so level experience that'll be worth playing. The arsenal is fun, the shooting is satisfying enough, and the kicks are definitely a highlight of the game, and I'm glad they added that. So that is KUR, currently available in early access. The link will, as always, be in the description below this video if you would like to check out the early access campaign yourself, wishlist it or wait for future updates, or just jump in right now and try it out. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.